We have a redevelopment study and preliminary investigation report for 78-102 Washington Avenue, PB 2017-04.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Don Mizell representing CME. This report that we're referring to tonight was actually submitted in July.
We're going to swear you in again, please.
Very good.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth and help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
So, just briefly, I'll review the process, how we got to this point. City Council authorized a study of this area, which I think you're all familiar with now, on the corner of Washington and William Street. It's a former used car parcel. It's 4 lots all together. It's 6/10 of an acre. And again, this study was commissioned or was dated July 2017. We adjourned it several times, but tonight you can make the determination of whether this is an area in need of redevelopment. So that's what I'm here to discuss. If you have any questions, please stop me. You've been through this before. You've designated several areas, so I'll assume that you're familiar with the process. Basically, this parcel has to meet one of 8 criteria that the statutes lay out. And in our opinion, it meets 4 of those 8, and I'll touch on those just briefly. Criteria A deals with the fact that the building is unsafe, substandard, dilapidated, or obsolete. What you have is a very small cinder block structure, no power. It's been abandoned for some time. So in our opinion, the fact that it's abandoned and hasn't been used for some time meets that criteria. Criteria B is very similar. It's a vacant building in disrepair, therefore criteria B is one we feel meets the criteria. It's an obsolete parcel, which is referenced in criteria D. When I say obsolete, the current zone, I believe, is BG, which does not allow auto sales. So in the miracle that somebody wanted to put an auto related business there, they could not. So the zoning for what was there is obsolete. New zoning is going to be recommended. So again, we use the D criteria. And the final criteria is something that we refer to as the smart growth criteria. I would refer to it as the good planning criteria. It would be good planning to redevelop this site according to standards that are listed in the statute. So in a nutshell, that is what we're asking, is that you as a planning board make a recommendation to council. It's important to note this is considered a non-condemnation redevelopment zone. That means that the council will not have the power to take this land from the current owner. In the past, there was not that option. You always had a condemnation component. This does not. It is not recommended. Any questions about the process, about the study?
Why does it have to be a piece of property in need of redevelopment?
Why does it have
Yeah,
to?
why do we have to approve this and send it to the council?
Well, because they've asked you to. They initiated this. And
So what's their benefit out of this? What do
the
they
benefit typically is that once it's designated as a redevelopment area, there are incentives to the owner, to the developer, designated developer, in the form of tax breaks or redevelopment.
I need a tax break myself.
That's all negotiated outside of the realm
Yeah, I
of
know.
whether this is an area or not.
I know.
Okay.
Does any other board members have any questions? Go ahead.
This site that we're talking about, this is the same site that had been approved by the zoning board, and its timeline of expiration, I believe, was June 26th.
June, it was this summer.
It was this summer, and then we met regarding it in July. And I believe at the time, in part of the presentation, this was discussed as being abandoned. Correct? Was it discussed as being abandoned?
You say abandoned, the plan is essentially abandoned
The
because it's
plan.
no longer valid. It expired. Whatever was approved prior, that timeline has expired, so there's nothing that's approved for that site.
And the ownership has changed?
The ownership has changed from what it was several years ago. I know I met the owner coming in this evening, if you'd like to ask him. But to be honest, it really doesn't pertain to whether this area is in need of redevelopment or not.
Oh,
It's a separate
the only
issue.
reason I'm asking whether it pertains or not, because the previous, it was during the time of an owner when there was a proposal to the zoning board. And that's the reason why I asked if,
But again, that approval has now expired, it doesn't apply to this investigation. And you could not build that project now, regardless whether you approve or not approve, that's expired.
I believe we received a communication from a lawyer, named Mr. DiPapolo, regarding some type of a 6-month extension. So I think that needs to be brought up as part of this.
Yeah, and then Mrs. Shore is correct. As a matter of fact, we stopped the process in order to find out the status of the application in front of the Board of Adjustment. And since that time, 2 letters were received. One went to the chairman of the Board of Adjustment, and the second one went to our construction official and zoning officer, Mr. Di Lorenzo, dated September 27, 2017. And with the chairman's position, may we have Mr. Di Lorenzo read this letter into the record? Yes.
As you may be aware, I represent 78-102 Washington Avenue Residence LLC. You may recall that on September 12, 2017, we made a request for an extension of the site approval on the above property prior to the planning board meeting this month. As it appears that this has caused some confusion with regards to the redevelopment, we respectfully withdraw our request for an extension at this time with prejudice and preserve our rights under 4055D-52.
Thank you, sir.
So does it become that the extension requested of the zoning board has been withdrawn?
Yes, and the chairman is here to clarify that.
If you want to swear me in.
I think we can take his representation, because this letter was also read into the record at the last meeting.
Correct.
So I believe that it is now appropriate for the board to go forward and make a determination whether or not this area is in need of redevelopment. And I also believe that it was appropriate for the board to adjourn the matter until this issue was clarified.
Well, we also requested to find out if the, since we assumed it was abandoned at that point, about taxes, capital taxes, did we find anything that they're paid or not paid?
I did not look that up, no. But again, that would not pertain to whether it's a...
No, but the board had requested a couple of items,
The
and you
ownership
said
is
you
what I
were going
remember.
to look into it, and I don't see anything
The
before
ownership
us.
is what I looked into, but again, the owner is here, he can explain how it's transpired from what it was to what it is today. But, as far as paying taxes, I did not look up the tax record.
What would be the difference, besides the potential tax abatements, what would be the difference in the proposed development at that site?
What is the difference? Well,
What would be the difference between what was proposed and just tabled or not followed through on?
Right.
And what is there a new proposed development? Would it be the same development?
I would say no, but what I did do is, right now, it's in the BG, commercial residential mixed-use zone, so only those uses that are in that zone would be permitted. Business, professional offices, and corporate offices, all retail sales and services, except for auto body repair, mixed-use commercial buildings in accordance with certain criteria. You have a hotel listed as a conditional use. So all of those uses would be permitted at that site, regardless of what you do here tonight. So those are the uses that are permitted. And the idea behind designating an area of redevelopment, you can then come up with specific criteria for that site. And your question, I think, is, are the criteria going to be the same? And as a planner, I can tell you they probably won't be, because hopefully you'll ask me to come up with a plan for that site, or our firm to do that. And we'll work with you to come up with what you think the best standards are.
I mean, to me, sitting on the board, I don't have a problem with it if the tool that the town needs to to enhance development is tax abatement, that's great. The only thing I don't like in a way is that we kinda outline what we're gonna put there, and then we never wind up going down that road, because we don't know what the potential developer wants to do in terms of apartments or stores, or what types of things, because we've gone through it a few times. I think the town probably does need some tool to enhance development, and tax abatements obviously are one of the reasons. I don't really follow through on all the criteria. It seems that you have just a very small guard shack out there, really. It's not an abandoned structure, so to
But
speak.
when you look at it from the criteria that you're supposed to look at it, yes, it's an abandoned
Yeah,
structure.
exactly.
That's, what I've learned in doing redevelopment work in New Jersey the last 10 or 12 years is that you can really make a difference by putting new criteria on a site. What I've done is always held the developers to a higher standard. You'll hear me, if I come back and talk to you some more, you're going to talk, I'll talk about green building standards, energy efficient standards, proximity to transit. All of those things come into play when you develop a plan for that site, even though it's only 0.6 of an acre. Again, you can get those mixed uses that you're desiring with a higher, holding the developers to a higher standard. So that's what I like to do with these documents once you move them along, and hopefully you'll get to see that.
You stated previously that you're going to be recommending soon a new zoning condition?
Well,
Do you have
what
something in
happens
mind
is
that would help?
if you designate it as an area of need of redevelopment, and council says we agree, typically what they do is then ask that a plan be developed for that parcel. So,
I understand, but it sounded like you already had something in mind.
no, what I was saying is, I don't have in mind putting back exactly what has just expired. That's what I was saying. I'm sure there are elements that might be considered, but to rubber stamp what was there previously approved, is not what you're going to see. You may see, I would think a mixed-use building would be nicer just off the top of my head, but not whatever the criteria was that was approved by the zoning board 2.5 years ago.
I just have a little bit of a problem with it, because for 20 years now we've been saying we were building something there, and it's never happened.
Excuse me, point of order. Can you take your conversation outside? Yeah, do us that favor so we can hear what's going on. Thank you very much.
My concern is that the project went before zoning because it wasn't in a designated zone at the time for residential. Therefore, it needed to go before zoning for an appeal, for an approval, which expired in June. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're dealing with the fact that there was a misuse by whoever owned it or currently owns it at the time that was deemed to be inappropriate, though it functioned that way for years, while 2 years ago the zoning board proceeded to say, though that area was not designated because of the appeal and the project, eventually, after a number of weeks, the zoning board approved. So that's what I find to be confusing. It was a car lot, but it wasn't supposed to be a car lot. But as we remember, by the way, we've always had nothing but a string of car lots at that part of Washington Avenue, but it wasn't approved. In the meantime, the zoning board approves an area that was not designated as commercial, but it was a PG, not residential. So they go before the zoning board approves, but now that's run out, so now it's coming before us for a mixed use, which I'm not in opposition to mixed use. That's not my issue. Nor am I against development or redevelopment, but this whole situation is, what's the difference between a 6-month extension within zoning, or all of a sudden, why is it coming to us? And it would be wonderful to see something rather than unfortunately something like the Lincoln Motel on Washington Avenue. You know, we don't want something that's an hourly rate, so certainly we would want something respectable. But given the amount of land that we have there, and so many people are talking about saturation, I don't know, I'm just confused by this whole thing. I need more clarity.
Clarify.
And it's not, I'm not criticizing in any way our desire for a greener approach to things. It's the whole package that is confusing me, that's all.
Just to clarify, residential use is allowed at that location. It has to be part of a mixed-use building. And the density for that is only up to 8 units per acre. So you've got 6/10 of an acre. Conceivably, you could put 5 residential units there under the current zoning. I'm sure the request back 2 years ago was a lot more units than that.
And it was approved.
And it was approved. So, but to be clear, residential is permitted at this location now as part of the DG zone, as part of a mixed-use
But not
development.
during the time of the application 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, it
It
was
was?
then.
Oh, it was?
But again, you could have only put 5 units there at the most.
All right, understood.
Does any other members have a question? If not, we'll open it up to the public. Does anybody in the public have a question of this witness?
Jeff Mattingly, 56 Walnut. I've listened to I guess a couple of months ago is when you initially presented this. And basically the criteria that you were seeking to meet was, very interesting, that it was unsafe now and it is vacant. Well, yes, it's an empty parcel of land. And that you pointed to the fact that vehicles were cutting through it because I guess there's no chain, marking that property as do not cross. And anything on a corner will be used today as a pass-through. It's a level lot, and people cut through it. So, I mean, that was a real reach, in my opinion. And obsolete, it's a vacant, it was misused. There was never any zoning allowed for a used car dealership, although it was illegally used that way and grandfathered in, so there it sat. Now, then it was considered possibly for senior housing, I believe, going backward. Isn't that what it is? And but 80 units per acre is the mixed-use concept that we're throwing around here on 6/10 of an acre. I mean, that's a lot of density. And in recent times, this board and tax abatements have been offered to the Soho Hospital and other properties that are now going to bring a lot of residential to Belleville, as has inundated the entire county. Neighboring towns all around us, we're looking at what it's costing the taxpayers in terms of children entering the school system and requirement for services to be expanded as this population base continues to expand. And now the idea that incentives to the developer are to seek tax abatement to add more residential, exacerbating all the problems of a small town with very limited access roads going through it, which now, I live 1 block off of Belleville Avenue. I can't get out of my street in the morning. I'm right also 1 block from Garden Avenue. It's a constant flow of traffic during rush hours that don't allow you to move. I mean, we're pretty much coming down to right turn only during business hours. It's really becoming impossible to negotiate your own town that is supposedly a residential town historically that accommodates a certain percentage of population in its infrastructure. Well, the infrastructure is so stretched, board, and so stretched out now that it simply isn't accommodating the present density.
So would you mind if our expert responds to some of your comments, please?
Certainly.
Which one would you like me to respond to?
Density is a big aspect.
There's no density proposed here, sir. What we're saying is the density at the project before was about 80 units, which would put it at 160 units per, if it had been approved, whatever. But
Right,
that
as opposed
approval,
to 8 units. Yeah.
not even 8. Not even 8, less than 8,
And
is
so-
what's permitted now. You
But,
could
but
still-
you did mention just now that you would consider, once again introducing that former plan that now.
No, that's not what I said at all, sir.
Did you just say that?
It sounded like that.
No.
No, you said that wasn't part of the, this is just a study. This
I understand,
redevelopment study
but this-
doesn't have a use yet.
But the study is basically the incentive idea that tax abatements would be sought that would transfer that tax requirement of any residential onto the existing tax base.
Well, let me just say this. This board has no jurisdiction about tax abatements, and we're looking at a narrow issue. You can help us on this. The issue is, does this property satisfy sufficient criteria under the redevelopment statute for this board to make a recommendation to the mayor and town council to look into it further as a redevelopment area? There is no zoning at this time, there is no density at this time that we're looking at.
There's BG zoning,
Would
correct?
you like to?
That is correct.
So that is a commercial application zoning on that property
That's the
now.
zoning now, but having this as a redevelopment zone would give everybody an idea.
And I'm speaking to the redevelopment. I'm suggesting to you that you not find this an area in need of redevelopment, considering that recent times have shown commercial development on that block, more than half of that block, moving south toward York. On that side of the street has been developed in market forces from contractors who sought and found reason to develop that block commercially, and which gives us taxes as a business, does not put children into the system, no residential, and that's the present zoning. And I believe it should stay that way because, the mixed use, it turns out to be a 600 square foot, building on the first floor and then 5 stories of residential.
Because we have some other applications, we're going to put you down as against the idea of redevelopment.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'd like to finish. I can't continue with my own words, so you have to shut me off.
You have to ask me
I'm going to call
questions
it.
Okay.
over what I testified to. That's what you're
Yeah,
supposed
we have to
to.
really keep it in, you can ask him questions as to what his testimony is. And
Right, well, you're
you know we're
suggesting
not trying
smart
to shut
growth.
anyone off.
Can smart growth include the restriction to strictly BG, where we develop commercially?
Smart growth is one of the 8 criteria mentioned, and it's part of a statute where it lists certain items that are, I can read them to you if you'd like, but it's the one that I like least because it's the most ambiguous. I mean, it's not very clear. So let me say what those are. So what a smart growth criteria does, it encourages the following: mixed land uses, compact clustered community design, range of housing choice and opportunity, walkable neighborhoods, distinctive attractive communities offering a sense of place, open space, farmland, and scenic resource preservation, future development strengthened and directed to existing communities, a provision of a variety of transportation choices, making development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective, and the last one is encouraging citizen and stakeholder participation in development decisions. So if the site offers those opportunities, it qualifies under this smart growth criteria. So, and to the effect that it does, basically this lot is a gateway to the downtown area. I walked it today. I actually walked down to Mill Street, walked back. It's got a fairly high elevation. If a 4 or 5 story building is there, you'd have nice views. But again, it meets the criteria in that it offers the opportunity to provide some of those items that I just listed.
Well, once again, I'd like to state to the board that what we need is businesses that bring us ratables, not drain and more tax requirement to compensate for any residential that would be basically necessitated by a desire for tax abatements.
The town still gets its share of taxes, though, you know that, right?
Well, the existing tax base is what picks up any differential. So either you pay the freight based on the taxes required, per square foot, like is existing, or there's any relief whatsoever. And those services and any children, that all comes back to the existing tax base who has to compensate.
There's
And
one
that's-
thing though, very often I see that whole idea put before the planning board as if we have some say in what type of abatement or how much the abatement will be, or how much the current taxes paid on that vacant lot are compared to what they would pay even if they had an abatement.
Well,
But that's
finding an
not for this
area in
board,
need
no,
of
but that's-
redevelopment is your business,
Well,
though.
that is, and I think that's a good tool to rezone a certain area so that we can get some development done. But the right board to be in front of, if you want to argue about an abatement, would be the city, the town
And
council.
we'll certainly do
Because that's-
that.
that's
But
not part
the
of what we-
existing zoning,
Participate in.
but the existing BG zoning for business is exactly what it should be. And so to alter that by this board considering it as changing the zoning to accommodate the developer who's seeking tax abatements is, I believe, not in the town's best
And listen,
interest.
we are all taxpayers, and I'm not personally opposed to some incentive for development. But that's not this
Not our
board.
concern.
Neither
You know
am
what
I.
mean? And
I'm-
we shouldn't be voting for or against development based on a tax abatement. That's
No,
very
but
different.
residential development is very expensive and exacerbates the problems that our
Well, can I be honest
infrastructure.
with this too, because I've been a few years on the board, I keep hearing every time there's a residential development, how the schools we have increased enrollment, but I've yet to see any proof of that. from
Well,
anybody,
it's
from-
yet to
from-
land. How many apartments are going to
Well,
serve?
no, I'm trying, but my point is, are there really increases in the enrollment in the schools that are?
Certainly is. In the township
I
of
get to see any
Nutley,
proof of
the
that.
neighboring town has an additional 1,000 children entering the district now. They have a $70 million bond referendum that they're looking at.
Well, part of that is due to lack of investment for decades too in these towns where.
No,
that's
it's
a part of
1,000
education issue.
new heads. Did you hear that? 1,000 new heads
Well,
are
there is
entering the
population
Nutley
growth. The
district.
town of Belleville isn't gonna stay stagnant in a world population that's growing, so we should kind of plan for that.
We're not stagnant.
We shouldn't be.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we
Population
are.
has
Okay.
increased.
Yes, we are. We are
Well,
stagnant.
you are not taking
check-
into account.
Check the Bureau of Statistics.
What
It's
about
there.
what about the additional
Check.
housing that you've authorized that has yet to come?
We're really getting off
Yes,
subject here.
the point is that our school district is not growing. The data's there, public data. The town population is not growing. In fact, it is decreasing.
It is not. The
Yes,
number
it
said
is.
it's
Yes, it is. It's not an
37,000 people.
opinion, it's a fact. That's all I'm saying, Jeff. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. I've done the research, you can do the research. To suggest that we are overcrowded and anything that we develop is inappropriate because of overcrowding.
No.
It's not
Housing,
true, nor
housing.
are our schools overcrowded.
I'm sorry, but the mayor just recently stated, we're now a town of 37,000. We're traditional 36 recently. So now we're, according to other studies that have been brought before the board
Well,
and the council.
I've looked at official statistics for the last 6 to 7 years. We are stagnant as a population.
In the school system.
And the school system as well. And that's data, it is not my opinion, those are the numbers.
But when these
Mr. Madden, you wanna
houses
wrap it
come
up?
online, I'm just, we do have a lot of housing that has been authorized, okay, and is coming online in the near future. That is going to produce, and certainly the traffic is horrendous in this area, and it's very tight. This is a town of 2.3 square miles when you remove the county property. 37,000 people,
Yeah,
according to the mayor.
we gotta move on, Mr. Madden.
Go right ahead.
Anybody else? Mr. Frank Antoni?
Yes, I'm sorry, Chuck, I forgot your name.
You
told
can
I
call me
called you
Don, remember? That's right.
Don, talking about that car lot was unauthorized or illegal.
It was
use.
probably called a non-conforming use. It was probably there for a long time before it closed, and now, since it's been closed for a year, it can't reopen as a car lot.
Right, but are you aware that it was there legally?
Well, I did not go back that far, sir.
Right, well, I can tell you, because I was involved, It was an original car lot that goes way back, one lot.
Before
Then
zoning?
Then it expanded, the owner allowed to expand it. And this is personal information. I personally made a complaint to Mr. Di Lorenzo that the owner was using the corner lot on William, the bigger lot, to expand his car lot. Mr. Di Lorenzo gave him a violation. He went before the zoning board, and the zoning board approved him to use that. So that car lot was not illegal. It was legal, it was approved. One was grandfathered in because it was there from 50 years ago when I came to town, and before that. And the other portions were allowed by the zoning board. In fact, that same owner, that original owner, owned a 4-unit apartment house with 4 stores underneath. It burned in the 90s. I have the videos of all that fire. And then he expanded the car use there. But then he went before the zoning board, got approval to make the whole lot. So just so the record shows, this was not an illegal use of it. He went through the channels after Mr. Di Lorenzo violated him.
If I use the term illegal, then that was inappropriate, but it's a non-conforming use based on the zoning that's there today, the BG zone.
Yes, we agree.
Okay.
That's it, but I just want the record to show, because Ms. Shaw, I believe she mentioned too, that it was illegal and shouldn't have been there at all. But it was legal, the zoning board approved it. In regards to Mr. Conti, about the, you believe the town, needs the tools to redevelop. I don't know how long you've been in town, but are you aware of Lower Washington Avenue? Are you aware of it 5 years ago? Are you aware of it when Obama killed the car industry? We had nice Bigelow Motors. Bigelow Motors closed up. Not because they wanted to, not because they didn't have business. I bought cars, my father bought all his cabs over there. He was thrown out. But what happened? Within a year or two, a developer took it over, and he took it over, cleaned it up. Family Dollar, not Joe's hardware store, a national chain, built there, no pilot, didn't have to be declared an area needed redevelopment. What's next door to it? Popeye's Chicken, again, a national chain. They didn't need redevelopment authority, didn't have to come before the planning board, to get their approval. Next to that, you have a nice big laundromat, big commercial laundromat hall. No pilots, no authorization, area new redevelopment. You go to Cleveland Street, you got Solar Domino, a nice restaurant which is packed, you can't get in there on the weekends and all that. No pilot, didn't have to be declared an area needed redevelopment. The second house in from Cleveland Street burnt down. They got permission by, I believe, the zoning board to rebuild. While they were building it, about a year and a half ago, it was signed all over. The first all-green building in Essex County. We didn't need to declare an area needed redevelopment or nothing like that. The Branchwood Manor, where I got married, you're familiar with that? That was abandoned, he went out of business, right? The Dollar Tree comes in, another national company. Demolishes the building, brings a brand new building. We didn't need an area need redevelopment to that. Right next to there, the old Ledgewood Auto Body, a building in disrepair. My friend owned it. He was in his 80s. He lost it to foreclosure. My other friend, the Mercy building, he has antique cars that he rents to the movies, millions of dollars in there. I negotiated the sale without commission. I got my 2 friends together. The one friend bought it from him, put his second floor. Have you been in there? Millions of dollars worth of cars in there. No redevelopment, area needed redevelopment. It's now the Mercy building, a beautiful building, if you bother to look at that. You go up and down, there's Dr. Sidaldi in that old gas station right across the street from where Bigelow was. No area needed redevelopment. We didn't need all this. No pilot, none of these big developments need pilots. We're getting, I complimented Councilman Kennedy because we're getting a little sick and tired of these tax abatements and pilots and areas that need redevelopment. And the reason why you can tell, the attorney can say, this is not your purview, but you are the tool. The town council cannot declare a pilot or a tax abatement unless you folks, the planning board, declares an area needs redevelopment. So that's what's going on here, and that's what
We
we're
recommend
against.
it, Mr.
Now,
Frantantz.
I can
We
go, I don't want to take
We don't
much more
declare, we
time.
recommend it. It's the council that declares it. We make a recommendation.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, you said we
So-
declare, we don't declare.
But you were,
The council
to
declares.
Mr. Mattingly, you were making it appear you were objected to him, that you have nothing to do with this. You do, you are part of that tool. The town council cannot give a tax abatement or a pilot unless the planning board declares it an area in need of redevelopment.
Unless we recommend it,
what-
right.
Again, and what I'm telling you, and I have the whole map of the 2 blocks coming
Yeah, I
from
think
north.
most of us are
We
familiar
had
with
tons
the
of
area. We're
development
just trying
next
to
to
concentrate on
Carl's.
this area.
I
This
think
one-
you
this
all
one
been in
lot.
Belleville, next to Carl's Appliances, remember that? Gentleman bought the old Tiger Hardware store, renovated, put apartments, then he comes back and he gets approval to build 3 townhouses in the backyard. So I was against it, but fine, he built them. No pilot, no area need development, he did it legally. So this is, I'll sum up at the end there, this is questioning the witnesses. But to the criteria, Don,
Yes.
use criteria A. The buildings, let me read it. According to the, and I go back before the area needed redevelopment statute, used to call it the blight statute, if you recall that. So I fought the town in that when they wanted to do it, and we won back then, so I'm familiar. It says the generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or possess any characteristics so lacking light, air, space as to be conducive to wholesome living. That what the statute says? And you're using criteria A. Well, number one, that dilapidated building you call was an office for used car lots, 10 by 20. It's the size of my kitchen, and it wasn't a dwelling unit.
It meets the criteria. It's dilapidated, it's deteriorated, it's unoccupied.
You know, words are important. It says conducive to wholesome living, right? Nobody was living in there. It was an office for a used car lot. And that you also use criteria B, the discontinuance of use of the buildings. It wasn't voluntary. The tenant was evicted. He just recently, like I stated earlier, had gotten permission to use the entire parcel for cars. So he was evicted. It didn't happen that this, because of the downgrading of the township and all, nobody wanted to use the site and all that. So I don't believe that qualifies either, if you consider the real facts of what's going on here in Belleville. D, you're saying that D qualifies. The dilapidation, the overcrowding of the property. You got over half an acre and you got 200 square foot building. Where's that excessive land coverage? Where's excessive land coverage? It's vacant land other than that building there. What really is there, it's owner neglect and it's lack of code enforcement on there. One of the pictures show there's a bunch of broken glass there. Well, that's not an area you need to redevelopment. That means either the building department didn't see it, wasn't told of the problem. It's just a matter of code enforcement. If he gets a letter, usually, you know, like see, I'm contract, tenants get it all the time, the building department gives 10 days to clean it up. So that's not an area you need redevelopment, that's code enforcement. And finally, you're using criteria H, smart growth, which I hope the public understands. This was something the politicians in Trenton added on just to accommodate developers. It really has nothing to do with the original blight statute. This is another scam that's been perpetrated on the people of New Jersey. Smart growth, fine. If you want to use the smart growth criteria, well, it's already proven that that area, the zoning board approved it for smart growth, allowing 80 units to there. So once again, there's no reason to declare this an area in need of redevelopment. All of those 4 criteria are all phony ones, and Don, I sympathize with you, because you mustered the courage to get up here and really stretch these 4 criteria to try to make it appear there. But if you good people who live in Belleville, and I thank again Councilman Kennedy, I hope he's against this, and Mrs. Shore, you had some concerns with this. and you're very puzzled why this approved project, and by the way, it was approved 3 times. It was approved in January of '06, in May of '07, and then in '15, a year and a half ago.
I think,
So
Mr.
it's
Frank
not that
Antoni,
this-
one of the reasons it was never done was because without encouragement with redevelopment, it wasn't financially sensible to do it. And that's why the building, it's been sitting there vacant for all these years.
Well,
And I
then
think the
why-
council wants to see something put there. We don't need all that vacant land on Washington Avenue. If someone wanted to put a warehouse or a commercial building, if it was financially viable, I think they would have did it. So we're trying to have a tool to get positive development into our town, to bring more taxes into our town. That's an empty lot. I don't know what they're paying, but I'm sure it's minimal what they're paying. And whatever goes there is going to pay substantially more. Even with a pilot program or tax abatement, it'll pay substantially more than what's being paid now.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
all the
maybe
abatements.
you weren't paying attention. All that development in the lower 2 blocks are what? The worst blocks are
You
what?
into Harrison or Kearney, all the redevelopments going on in there around the PATH station, around the new stadium, that's all through redevelopment.
I work in some houses, I got family living up. You know what their taxes have gone through the roof because of that
If they
development?
didn't have development, what would their taxes be?
But let's stick to the issue here. That whole area has been redeveloped without being declared an area of redevelopment. So if this owner really wants to make money, instead of making money and let the taxpayers subsidize him, he can, and he'll sell. Everybody's doing business down there.
Where?
Up the Lower Washington Avenue. Family Dollar, the Dollar Tree, Popeye's Chicken, my friend owns those other cars, the doctor's office. In fact, I get calls 3-4 times a week from the doctor's office because one of our phone numbers is different. I get calls for his office all the time. He's very busy. But, so there's no reason to declare it's an area of
Mr.
redevelopment
Frantantoni,
because that,
one difference between the developments you mentioned, a lot of them were existing structures that were renovated. There's a far cry to renovate an existing structure, but the car dealership, the dollar store, well, the dollar store, because of its condition, was almost new construction. But a lot of the things you're talking about are renovations. This isn't a renovation, it's
what are
it's
you
a rather
talking about
large development.
renovation?
The
Huh?
dealership.
He got down-
Bigelow was renovated, Bigelow was renovated.
And he put an addition, made a big parking lot,
renovation. It's
more
renovation.
parking that they need is really parking. The Branchwood Manor was
That was
demolished,
a renovation.
right? These here, but this can be done, and the proof that it can be done, because it was approved.
But it wasn't built. It wasn't built.
It wasn't, well, look, you declared School 1 there in new development, it was approved for 60 units, he never built. It was approved 36 units right across from School 1 on Rucker Street, approved, went through all that money, our tax dollars spent to do that, he never built.
Taxpayers' dollars spent to do that? I think the developers pay for any studies.
Yeah, we're paying our town employees to do this. Our building inspector, Mr. Di Lorenzo, has to
Fees
take
that
the
cover their
time.
salaries from the developers, but
Well,
let's
he
move on. Let's
just
stick to
gets out
the
for
topic.
doing this. But there is no reason to declare that. When we have an area, and it was the worst part of Washington Avenue, in the last few years, is back, private development. This guy can build private development and he'll make money. And by the way, and then one of you has mentioned Conti in there, when you do a pilot program, the Board of Education gets no money. Number one, the pilots usually, it's a much bigger discount, usually about 30% of what the taxes should be. The town gets 95%, the municipal government, the county gets 5%. The Board of Education gets nothing
Well,
from
that's something that
pilot
can be worked
program.
out. That's something that can be worked out.
The point is here, I hope enough of you have the courage to know that this is just a deal to give the taxpayers the benefit to make
Thank you,
millions
Mr.
of dollars
Frantantoni.
more, and the rest of us, including you, if you're taxpayers or renters, whatever you are, we're going to pay and subsidize these things.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience have a question of this witness? Now, we'll close the public portion. Would someone like to make a motion?
Wait. What about testimony? That was the question.
Sorry.
Public have a right to give testimony. I mean, I want to give testimony. That's the whole thing. I just want to clear something up, and it has nothing to do with his testimony. That's why I wasn't asking any questions.
Let me ask you this. If you're gonna give testimony, then we'll have you sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I want to sworn.
Yeah.
I'll swear.
Whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
State your name, please.
Tulio Del Gershio, 8 Grove Street in Belleville, Chairman of the zoning board. To make things straight, and Ms. Shore is a little misunderstood there. She thought it was for a 6-month extension. He was asking for a 2-year extension. He was asking for, now, the rule is you can ask for up to 3 1-year extensions. And technically, this is expired, but not forever. I'm going to tell you why. For up to those 3 years ending, he can come anytime asking for an extension, and it goes retroactive to when this allegedly or technically expired. So really, there's 3 more years here where he can come. However, if the case is decided as an area in need of redevelopment, it comes out of the zoning board's jurisdiction and goes into your jurisdiction and the council's jurisdiction. The only time it would come back before us is if they propose something and it's rejected by both the planning board, or it's approved by the planning board and rejected by the council. Then he can come back for a hearing before the zoning board because it's not being approved what he wants to put. And then it would come back before us.
And ask for a variance.
And ask for a variance, exactly. And Mr. Frantantoni was right. There was a variance given for the parking lot. And he's also right that the person was thrown out. The person that owned the property was leasing it to the person who had the used car lot. And they didn't extend the lease and let him go because they wanted to build this project. And that's how it was. And I know as of 2015, the person who owns the property now was a part owner. He ended up selling it after that. Well, actually not selling it. He bought the full 100% of the property. He was a part owner. Whether he was a part owner in 2005, I'm not sure. But as of 2 years ago, he was definitely a part owner. And then he bought out his other partner. That's how it all worked. Okay, so if there's any questions, you could ask me. But that's how this fell into place. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public have testimony they'd like to give? If not, we'd like to close the public portion. Someone like to make a motion to accept the recommendation of the redevelopment study, declaring this an area in need of redevelopment? Somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Lois, call the roll.
Mr. De Niro,
Yes.
Mrs. Inaugurado,
No.
Councilman Kennedy,
No.
Mr. Conti,
No.
Mr. Walsh,
No.
Mrs. Shore, no, Mr. Bove,
No.
Mr. Sanabria,
Yes.
Ms. Rico.
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.